Hi, my name is Nicole Henson. I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and on this channel, we're learning to pattern our lives after the Holy Order of God, as we see in His temple patterns, and learning to do everything in our lives through His ways and becoming more like a temple through those patterns that He gives us. And today, on this episode, I'm just going to wrap up a series. This will be the fourth in a four-part series that we've been doing on the Spirit of Revelation. And today I'm just going to kind of tie in all the principles we've talked about a little bit, and then end you with a song that I wrote in relation to the Spirit of Revelation and miracles, and the miracle of all miracles, like the brother of Jared had when he presented to the Lord a need for a miracle that then produced the bigger miracle of where the Lord could no longer be withheld in the bit. So we're going to kind of talk about all those things and wrap them up together today. As far as music goes, the reason I want to tie this all together with a song is because for me, my journey in music has been a process of revelation. So I kind of want to tell a little bit of that story in hopes that people can gain some insights of how, if there's desires of your heart that you can see, well, through my experience, really, that my experience in coming to do music the way that I have has absolutely nothing to do with me. And so that's what I want to show today. It is really a process of revelation. It is all connections that came through God, and is the only way I can describe it. And so hopefully you'll see that today as I share my journey. And I feel like as we kind of learn God's ways and who He is and the nature of God, it really, like, nothing is unto ourselves. It is all Him. And that kind of makes it easier in a way to submit to that and to get things done. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and I'll portray some of these concepts. We'll kind of do a review and then portray some of these concepts in the song, and I'll go through the song with you so you can see, and then have a song to kind of help implement these ideas in your life. So if you saw the last video, the girl that was in that one, it was the third part of the Spirit of Revelation video. Her name is Joanna. She has a lot to do with my journey in delving into music. And so that's kind of why I brought her into the last one. And if you watch the last video, you'll be able to see a little bit of the connection patterns God has with us as a whole, one heart and one mind. And we'll talk about the power of the heart and the mind. We've talked about that a little bit before. We'll kind of readdress that today. And so I'm going to go into that story, music, how she tied it a little bit into that. And I think I'm going to back up a little bit and tell you a story about me in college. When I was in high school, I failed high school chemistry. Maybe I got a D-, I can't remember. Pretty bad. And when I went to college, I knew that I had to study chemistry in order to pass, to do the route of which I thought I was going to pursue, that I was going to have to take these chemistry classes. So I tried to book it really hard on the books and just really focus on chemistry, to the point that I let all my other classes by the wayside. And And I was still really struggling. I just could not grasp the concepts of chemistry. It was so foreign. I remember just so much frustration sitting in the class, dazed. And there's been a few times in my life where I've had some life-changing miracles that shifted the course of direction in my life. And this was one time, and I don't remember exactly what happened, what I had done that led up to that. I wish I had journaled it. But what I do remember was one night I had a dream, and in this dream, I was taught that these are the words that I heard was, you already know this. You already know how to do this. So I don't know what that meant, if it means, I had prepared myself for this before coming to this life, or there were things I did and learned before, and now I just needed to remember. But that was the feeling I got from this dream, was I just needed to remember what I already knew. And I bring that up because one thing the Holy Ghost does is he brings all things to our remembrance. And that word remember I don't know enough about it now, but I think about it a lot. I ponder on it a lot. There's obviously more to it than I have yet been able to unfold in my own life. But this is one thing I have been able to unfold is sometimes we're learning things for the first time, but I think sometimes we're learning things through remembrance. And so what happened for me was nothing short of a miracle. It was literally an overnight change in a dream. And in this dream, I was taught, or I was, let's say, my mind was quickened. I have a firm belief that the Lord can quicken your mind like that. And in whatever he needs you to do, he will quicken your mind in the way that he needs to. And for some reason, this was an area that my mind needed to be quickened. And I remember doing these problems, these chemistry problems, a lot of mathematics that went into it in my dream. And I woke up the next day. I remember being at school, at the library, studying, and just like, I not only could do the problem, but the concept made sense. I comprehended it. I'm like, I understand this. And it was like it was like a whole section of my mind had been open, and now I could function at this level of comprehension going forward. Now, it doesn't mean that I didn't have still learning to do. I still struggled. I still had a lot to overcome. But in that class specifically at that time, there was some sort of window to my mind that had been open, and it just made sense. And actually, as I'm saying this, I kind of think about that. I had been putting the work in. I had been putting the faith in. I just was getting nowhere. And then it was a literal miracle that opened the way, that dream. And it was an overnight change. So in maybe the first video I did on the Spirit of Revelation, we walked through the temple diagram about you have to put action in, you have to do the faith, and then right before the veil is this impossible moment. And now as I'm saying this, I'm like, oh, that is what happened to me. It's not that I didn't put the work in, but it literally took an impossible moment for the miracle to happen, where I couldn't do it anymore. And then overnight, a literal miracle. And then what began to happen was in that class, I ended up being the one now leading the the discussion groups and the study groups, and then I ended up I ended up getting one of the highest grades in the class. The first semester I didn't do good. So this is the second semester that it was kind of like right at the beginning that something clicked. And so then the rest, I think I didn't do great on the first test, and then the rest of them, I was acing them. almost nearly 100%. And then, and I was loving it. I was just like, oh, I was loving it. And then I ended up, I think it was the second highest grade in the class. The first highest guy went on a mission. So the professor would ask whoever the highest was to be the student aide the next year and help teach the class and the labs. And so since the guy who had the highest went on a mission, I was next in line. And so I got it. And then he put me up for a scholarship to study chemistry. And I ended up studying chemistry and up at Utah State. So that's how my chemistry career began, with a miracle. And I still struggled. There was still some classes. There was one I had to retake. Actually, there's two that I had to retake. And in this process, I think now that I look back and kind of see what unfolded in my life, I noticed some of the classes I did really well in, some of them I didn't. But if I could, I think what was happening was if I could see a spiritual nature in what I was learning, it was easy. And so in my physical chemistry class, which is the curve in the nation, it's known for being like the hardest class and the hardest class. You have like certain lower level weeding outs like organic chemistry and that stuff. Then in the chemistry major itself, you have physical chemistry, which is like quantum chemistry is the hardest. And there's a lot of ideas and theories that go into it. I mean, these are kind of things that like Einstein himself hadn't quite come to yet. And there's a lot of theory but for some reason in that class, I thrived. All the other ones I had to retake, I struggled with, but in that one, the average on a test across the nation would be like 30 or 40%. And so that was the curve, because it was just known that this was a hard thing. I remember the first test in that one, I got 100%. And he had to throw it out because of the curve. He was going to throw the curve out. And just trying to figure out like what's going on, because I fail this, I do good at that. And now in simplicity, I think, well, I'm like, well, that's because like spiritually that made sense. There were things that was like, it was theory. And so if I applied like a spiritual concept to it, it's like, oh yeah, this seems right. And so chemistry took on more of a, it's the makeup of all things. It's the creation of how it all comes together. And so if I look at that in a spiritual sense, it seems more simple. So, and I think that's maybe part of what was meant by, you already know this is the spirit, like, this. And so as I've applied that to life, it's become a lot easier to engage in a lot of different things by looking through the spiritual glass or the patterns of God or this temple lens that we talk about on this channel. Looking at things in that way, it makes a lot more come to life. And I think in the first video I did, we talked about how somebody had sent me a video from the History Channel about Isaac Newton and how he, looking at the temple, there's a whole thing behind what they think might have happened, but they think that how he learned all the physics that he learned was from studying the temple, and the temple in the book of Revelations and why it needed to be rebuilt. And all that was kind of kept hidden until about 50 years ago. And then they started finding writings from his that he hadn't shared, because at the time it would have, caused his death. And so, anyway, it was just, you can find that on the History Channel. It was just kind of a really interesting insight, because I'm like, yeah, if I look at things through that way, all of a sudden everything makes a lot more sense and seems so much more simple than the world would make it seem. So with that and music, I had a very similar experience with this remembrance concept. In 2019, President Nelson asked the women to study a few sections, and one of them was D&C 25. And that's the one where Emma is asked to, she's asked to write the hymns. And then there was the scripture in there, I can't remember which verse, but it essentially says that the song of the righteous is a prayer unto me, unto God. And prior to that, I had I okay. It began back in college. I couldn't I couldn't read music very well. I mean, a little bit, but not very well. And I kind of grew up just kind of fiddling with what I could hear on the piano, but not enough to really feel comfortable. I never played for anybody. I would kind of write some songs. I didn't think they were really worth much, but I would write them, and I would always play when nobody was in the house. I would wait till everybody was gone, and then I would practice playing. And when I got to college, I decided I wanted to learn how to sight read music. And so I picked a song that was kind of popular at the time. I think it was like Jim Brickman, Angel Eyes, or one of those. And I would go there at our apartment complex. On the top level, there was a piano. And so I would go up in that room and just play the piano and try to learn to sight read when nobody was there. And one day, a couple of my friends came up, and there was this girl with them that was a piano major and a singer. And I went to Snow College, so it was like a lot of science majors and a lot of music majors. And she was really good. And I remember I was up there playing, and they walked in, and she said, and I don't fault her for this. In fact, it's been a good learning experience for me, but she said something about, oh, just because you can play that song doesn't make you a pianist. Everybody can play that song. And I got so like, oh, like I remember thinking like, I don't know why I'm trying. I'm never going to be able to play the piano. I'm just never going to be able. And it didn't stop me from playing, because I still love to go play, but I did stop trying to sight read. And I just wasn't cognitive enough to like put it together that like, yeah, maybe everybody can play this, but I'm trying to learn something. I'm trying to learn to sight read. So I just her words were like, oh, yeah, you're right. I'm never gonna be able to do this. And so I would never play, like, again, never wanted to play in front of people. And I had maybe twice. Once when I was little, I tried to play at the old folks' home, and I got really screwed up because I was so nervous, and then I couldn't finish playing, and it traumatized me. And I had never healed from that experience. So I just thought, I'm never gonna be able to play. And then this girl, I'm like, yeah, so it just added the trauma. And then I continued to still kind of like fiddle around and write melodies and songs. And then when I got the guts up to play a little at my grandpa's funeral, and then one other time in a singles ward, I played a song by Paul Cardall, Redeemer. It's one of my favorites, and it's an easy enough song that I felt like, and I had orchestra with me, and so I felt like if I had somebody who can cover me if I make a mistake, because I can't read music, so I can't just pick up. I have to make sure I know it, and so I'm like, well, if somebody can cover me if I make a mistake, that'll help me from getting too nervous, and so I did, and I played it, and it went fine. And so a couple years ago, I decided to like get the courage up and try again. And so I picked the song that I already knew that I could do. So I did the same song, the Paul Cardall one. And I played that with some musicians in my ward. And after that, my friend Joanna, she came up to me and she said, wow, Nicole, I didn't know you could play like that. And I was like, well, I really don't. And she said, no, she's like, people can, she gave me a very nice compliment. It was a very opposite experience. She said, people can play, but you feel what you play. And she's like, you just feel, it was just beautifully played. And I thought, oh, thanks. And then somebody said something to my husband that was really nice too, that said, wow, that was, well, no, remember this had other musicians too that are really top notch, and my ward has a lot of musicians and like high level musicians. And so I said, wow, that sounded really professional. And there were just a lot of good feedback that came from that. And then like that week, the girl that was in charge of the music in the ward, she said, she was out of town when I played, and she said, I got so many comments about that one. And she said, people really loved it. I mean, the song is pretty, to me, the song is very beautiful. So it's not hard to feel something with that song. And so, but she said, and so we got talking about it, and I said, yeah, I don't play. I just don't know really how. I'm not a performer. And she said, well, her husband, she said he learned by ear, and that was the Suzuki method. I'm like, what's that? And she started telling me this is a whole process of learning that has nothing to do with reading music, or less to do with it, and where you learn to play by ear. And I said, that's a thing? And she said, yeah. A lot of people play that way. And I'm like, oh, well, I can do that. So I'm like, okay. So I gained a little bit more confidence at that moment, right? So you can see it took a lot of people to help rebuild a little bit of confidence. And then I was like, okay, I can do that. And then when I was reading D&C 25, I just had this really strong impression that my gift I was trying to make it look like others, and that it did not need to look like everybody else. They didn't have to read music in order to engage in music. It didn't have to be like everybody else's. And so where I was trying to fit myself in a box, and thought, well, I'll never get there because I don't fit in this box. And with that, and then I read the D&C 25 verse, that the song of the righteous is a prayer unto God. And when I read that, I just heard this voice say, you already know how to do this. Like there was something inside me that, growing up, I would play and just play what I felt or could hear in my mind. And I loved words. I loved to write words. And so it felt like an innate nature in me. And then I just felt you need to work in the direction of music. And so I thought, okay. And so this friend of mine, Joanna, that was on the last one, she said, if you want help with some of the things you've written, I can help you get that in writing. And I said, okay. So she came over, she kind of taught me about her program, how to use it. The first song, she just did it all for me. I played it and then she put it into notes. And then after that, she showed me how to use the program. And so I still am not very good. I'm learning, but I'm still not very good with the notes. But I can hear it, so I can play it and get it into. My producer even asked me once, he's like, so how do you do this? He's like, you do it one note at a time? I'm like, yeah, pretty much. So I'm probably not as fast as a normal musician, but which goes to attest that like anyone can do anything. I've had some friends say, you're like the anomaly. And I'm like, yeah, I'm the proof that like God can work through anybody. And I do like to be that proof for him that he is working in all of us if we'll just engage. So then the next steps that happened after this was literally just like outlined as I just paid attention. Some ideas just sparked. Something started with words just coming to my mind, and I would put that down, or a melody I couldn't get out of my head, or a song replaying, or so then I just go with it. It's like, okay, I didn't overthink it. Just this is what it is. And I decided, after my friend Joanna helped me get one of my first songs down on music, she kind of put it in a little MP3 for me. And then she kind of talked about, if you have a producer do this, it's like way better than this program that we're using. And so I'm like, okay. And I thought, what, wouldn't it be so fun to have at least just a bucket list, just have one song produced, just I just think that would be really awesome. So it's not cheap. So luckily my husband let me talk him into it, and like, let's just try it. And I did one. And a friend of mine was using this producer, and so she recommended him to me, and we went through process one. Well, this guy that produced it, afterwards, he his daughter and my daughter are about the same age, and they ended up in the same dance class together. And he and I were sitting waiting for our daughters to get out of dance in the foyer of the dance place, talking one day, and he told me a little bit about his story. And long story short, he just said, I felt like God led me here, and here to Utah. He's not a member, but he is a Christian, and he said, I feel like God led me here, wants me to focus on music centered on Christ. And he said a few other things about his journey. And I just heard this strong impression say, you need to work with him. And so I just, okay. So let's try another song. And so we did. And then another one. And since then, I built a really good relationship with their family. And he's it's so fun to talk to, because he has so many questions about the gospel. And so a lot of it, this whole thing for me, has been a relationship with their family that's come about through all this. So that's been a really fun thing to see come out of something I feel like I was being led into. And and in the very first introduction to the channel video I did, I told a little bit of story about him, and how some of the words for the song, which I'm going to share today, were coming to my mind that day. And I was praying to know if they were the right words. And sure enough, he said something, and then my neighbor sent me something that had the exact words in it. And I'm like, those are the words I was just praying to know. And it was this total interconnected thing that you can't fake. So I knew these are the words that God wants, because we're trying to show this pattern of how he works. So that was a big part of like the words coming together. It's just the whole thing's been a process of revelation that just seems like it's got nothing to do with me. The words come sometimes from other people. So they come from wherever God sends them. And it's like my ears are just, that's what you just said, so this song, somebody, if you were the person that did it, please let me know. Somebody said the phrase "made to need a miracle." And I remember just being like, that sounds like it needs to be a song. So I didn't know any of the words yet. I just knew I'm going to write a song called "Made to Need a Miracle." And because there's just something about the concept of it just hit me pretty hard. So like, it's just sometimes the words or phrases come through other people, and I'm just trying to attune to what feels right. So, it's a lot more in depth than this, but mostly what I just want to share is that for me, it was just knowing when there's a source of God out there in somebody, and hearing when he's speaking in that, and giving answers, and that one heart and one mind, how we're all unified. In my last video, we talked about how I had a miscarriage, and Joanna had a miscarriage. And then when we both, a year and a half later, started to tell our story of what we learned from that, and realize how interconnected they were, we learned so much more through each other. And the very first video that we did on the Spirit of Revelation was how we learned as a community to connect in revelation with each other, and kind of this one heart, one mind, Zion type idea, that I think if it becomes just about us, it's not the way of God. And so it's meant to be, God is in all of us. Christ is the life force in all of us. And so tapping into that is so important. That is the nature of God. And so we can't just do things unto ourselves and then expect that they will be his will. I mean, maybe they will be successful, but it's in one of the videos we talked a little bit about how the like the best business ideas are when it's about growing people. And the same idea when it comes to the gospel, it's about growing people. And in anything we do, if it's about growing others, things just seem to work. With the singers that I've chosen, it was always like a very aha moment. This is your singer. This is the right person. And God did not give me the vocals. Maybe he did. I believe we can learn anything. So we'll know it'll be a real miracle when I turn out and sing a song, and then you'll know God lives. Not that you already know, but that's just not a gift I have. And I'm also not a performer. I get nervous to play. And that's where I had to learn to be okay with things that are not my gift and find what is my gift and then connect it to others. And like, I'm fully dependent on others to make this happen. And that, I think, is kind of the point. It's like, we need to be dependent on each other and bring our own little piece and create this perfect solar system, around our center, the sun. So that's a little bit of the journey that's brought me to this. The only reason I bring all that up is to kind of emphasize the spirit of revelation and the process of revelation and the miracles that can come when I had that experience of remembrance again with the music, kind of that same concept. It was another pattern in my life. I've seen this pattern before with chemistry. You already know how to do this. Same thing with the music. You already know how to do this. It was that pattern of remembrance. And but then still a lot of work ahead by working and knowing when God is coordinating and putting more patterns and things together to actually bring it to life. And we talked about, when something's just an idea or a concept versus when it's actually like you hold the seed in your hand versus when it's the tree that's become the miracle. And these process of telestial, terrestrial, celestial, this growth. Same thing here. There was a point where it's just an idea, and then a point where he's actually coordinating things. And one thing we haven't talked about, I don't think I have the temple diagram pulled up. We haven't really talked about this yet. There it is. Oh, I don't think you can see it. One thing we haven't talked about yet, and I'll just, if you have your temple diagram, that that terrestrial phase, that holy place phase, if we're talking about like a progression of creation, that's the hope phase where you're completely dependent. That's when the Israelites were completely dependent on the Lord to give them light, fire, manna, water. They were completely dependent. So they had left just faith, unto themselves. And that now they were in this point of like, we're completely dependent on God. We've left our need to depend on ourselves behind. We're completely dependent on God. And that's how I felt in going through this music process. Was I need him to show me what to do next to make something come to life. And I need him to show me the people to do that. And he does. So I just think it's just another thing that tests God. I know nothing about music, and here comes music. It's on the radio now, and who would have ever? I never would. Yes, and I think that's the whole point. It's got nothing to do with me. That's why it ended up. That's why it ended up there. So I say that because I think that God puts desires in our heart. If you look at DNC, like just go read through all the beginning of DNC and how many times it mentions the desires of our heart. Some desires are placed in us because they are who God wants to create us to be in some way. So if you have some sort of desire and you're like, oh, I stink at this, I could never do this, I'm hoping that my story helps you see the anomaly. And it's always the weak person that God does this with, right? It was Moses. I can't speak. How am I going to do this? Joseph was just a farm boy. It's always David, King David. It's always the case. And so if you have some sort of desire, but you think that you can't go anywhere, apply it to God's patterns and apply the covenants, the law of sacrifice and obedience in a way in regards to this, and let him bring you to a point where you fully trust him and he takes control, and you are now learning his ways through his sanctification, if that makes sense. If you look at the diagram, hopefully that makes sense. Let's see. I think that's about all we're going to talk about today. Yeah, so hopefully that helps. And quite literally, the process of like, you were made to need a miracle, because it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about him showing his power within, and that seed growing up into a tree. Oh, the last thing I'm going to say about that is when I submitted the cover art for this, if you watched the last video about the miscarriage and the miracle that we learned from that, I talked about the imagery of the Lord placing a seed in my hand through that experience, and what I learned from that, how you already have your miracle because you hold the seed in the hand, and it's like the tree already exists inside the seed. And so I've really grown to love the concept of the seed and the manifestation of a seed. And in fact, this necklace I have on, my friend gave me for my birthday. It's a mustard seed, because I really love the seed concept. And so I put this picture on. It was one I took, and I put it on the cover, and my producer is like, "Are you sure we're talking about miracles? You sure you don't want like something bigger and like boom, a miracle?" Yeah, we talked about, I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. He's like, it seems kind of LDS. I'm like, yeah, like I think there's a purpose in the simplicity, is the magnitude is in the simplicity. And that's, why we always go back to the basic principles of the gospel. But when you learn about it and you go back to the basic principle again, it's magnified and you understand it so much more clear. I had some friends over one night, and we were talking. Somehow we got talking about charity. And by the time we left, we were like, oh my goodness, charity. And it's like, my whole life is like, yeah, charity. But then all of a sudden it's like, no, charity. It's like, it's so much deeper of an understanding, but it's the same principle. The principle never changed, just our depth within it changed. And that's the power of the seed, is like, hopefully it will cause people to think like, made to need a miracle, and there's a little seed. And so we kind of talked about that, and he's like, and I talked about Moses. I said, Moses he was told he'd be greater than many waters, but he had no idea what that meant until he got to the waters. And so it was the seed of the idea. That's where the miracle began. We're all expecting like this miracle to just appear, but if a miracle is had, it probably started in God's word somewhere a long time ago. He planted the seed somewhere a long time ago and grew it to that point. And so by the time it manifests as a miracle, whether we recognize it or not, he knows that he put it in you to begin with somewhere along the way, and that through faith and hope, it's grown up into the celestial realm of charity. And that parting the veil moment, I always put in the scriptures, we always see, I talked about this in a different video, but at that veil, that when all the patterns of the scriptures are following a similar pattern, there's always seems to be this impossible moment. And it's like, you were meant to need an impossible moment. You were meant to need a miracle where when you're going through that phase of completely trusting in the Lord, there's got to be a moment where you have no hope left, so that the power by which it comes. And that's the representation of the impossible moment and the miracle that we'll see in this song. And we talked about that in the Brother of Jared's story, where the Lord is almost kind of putting doubt in the brother of Jared's mind when he's like, sorry, I can't say his name without messing it up. But he kind of was like, what are you going to do? You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't do this. So what are you going to do? And he's like, well, okay, I'm going to do this. You need to light these stones. And then there's a whole idea of like, at that point, he likely knew what the stones represented. They were a Urim and Thummim, and the Lord saying, yes, this is the miracle that then brings about the greater miracle. And the hopes that one day we will have a miracle that will also bring with it that greater miracle. Well, yes, you have shown me that you know me. You brought me a Urim and Thummim. You mortared these in the mountains. You brought me a Urim and Thummim. You know me, past, present, future. You know who I am. And with that, I can't be withheld from the veil anymore. And so, so that is a little bit of element that we see in that we'll see in this song. So I'll walk through some of the lyrics of the song real quick, and then you can listen to it for yourself. Okay, some things that I want you to notice about the song is first, the singer. I wanted to do a male singer on this song because I wanted a Moses and somebody who had like a deep, really powerful voice that could, portray a Moses, because we're talking about the spirit of revelation, miracles, and that in D&C 8, that's referred to Moses bringing the children through the Red Sea. So we tried to embody that in the singer. And if you notice at the beginning of the song, you will notice kind of a heartbeat sound. So that's kind of that heart beginning to take effect, that intelligence system beginning to take effect into the progression of manifesting a miracle. And then there's a bridge that I just tried to envision like Moses in the process of parting the Red Sea during that bridge. So there's a couple things just to pay attention to, right, from the beginning. And it starts out as chaos in the world overflows, as trials are too much to undergo, which we are seeing a lot of in the world. It seems impossible, hold steady in his hope. So I put the phrase hope there because I do need to pull up this temple diagram. Screen share. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So this is the hope phase, right? So I put hope in there to hold steady in that hope. As we go in future videos, we'll see how in all the scriptures, this phase of things seems to be the, like the mists of darkness, and you're entered a new realm of sanctification, which is also quite a storm at the same time. And so, but that's the hope stage where we've left. We have God's promises, God provides, God prevails. So you've left just believing in having faith in his promises. You're now in the phase of he provides everything for me. And until it's impossible, and we're learning to let him provide everything for us until we're left with no hope but for him to provide everything for us. And that's this, if you come to an impossible moment in your life, you're on the right track. There's a miracle about to happen. Is it the miracle of all miracles yet? I don't know. That's he'll guide you in that. He might guide you through this process more times until you become this, and become like the brother of Jared. But so that's part of the wording in the song. It seems impossible. Hold steady in his hope. We're talking about this phase here. Hold steady in his hope. Doubting, would you ever come to know, to embrace impossible? So you're meant to be left with the choice to doubt or to believe. You need that. You need to embrace the impossible moment. The Red Sea moment, where it's like, what are we going to do here? Embrace impossible. And then if you do, he might bring a remembrance to you that I actually already told you I was going to make you greater than many waters. And at that moment, the heart and the mind combined. Yes. We talked about that a little. Sorry, I'm not re-going over all these concepts. Otherwise we'd be here for hours. But that heart and mind combined. You're made to need a miracle to prove you walk with God. That has a lot. We haven't talked about this yet, but the iron rod has a lot of connection of walking the iron rod with God. To learn his mind. This was the phrase that was given to me that was confirmed by the friend with the exact words. To learn his mind, to feel his heart, and know him when he calls. So, right, there's faith. This is Alma 32:34, where our faith becomes dormant. We now have a knowledge in that thing. And essentially, in the end, hoping to have a knowledge in Christ. To learn, so the mind, to learn, to feel, the heart, and then with those two coming together, it creates a knowledge. So we talked about before Moses, he's the easiest story that we see this with, because the Lord tells us this is the spirit which he parted the Red Sea, the heart and the mind. I will tell you in your mind and in your heart, and this is the spirit of revelation, and this is how he brought the children of Israel out. And then we look at what he was given in the beginning. He was told he would be greater than many waters. At that point, he was told it, but he hadn't felt it yet. And I think you don't feel it until you're at the point you need it. And then you go back and remember the Lord, and then remember what he already gave you. And at that point, you feel it. There's no way to explain that in words. You know it if you've been through it. But, Moses had seen all these miracles. He had progressed, right? He had little faith in the beginning. Why are you choosing me? I don't know how to speak, blah, blah, blah. And then his faith, you can see his faith grew over time. And he went through all the plagues, and that built him as a person until he went to the waters. And at that point, he had a knowledge. The Lord is going to deliver us. And I think the Lord did something similar with him as the brother of Jared. Like, that's great. You're telling the Israelites, that I'm going to deliver you, but how? Like, he was asking him, how are you going to do it? And so at that point, it would have been up to Moses to come to a remembrance of what the Lord had already taught him. So there's a similar pattern there in that story. And then why this miracle? What was it, the miracle that brings about the greater miracles, that parts the veil? There's always a deliverance element involved as well. Brother of Jared was trying to deliver his people across and, give these people light. And that was a part of parting that veil, and parting the waters, the Red Sea, also a symbol of the veil. For Moses's journey himself, coming to that understanding, he was delivering people. It was different than the other plagues and the other miracles. This time, this was the thing that actually delivered them from their enemies. So there's that portion that comes into play too. So, and know him when he calls, it's possible. And the next verses, his work begins when heart and mind combine. And we've been talking about that. I will tell you in your mind and your heart. If you haven't, go watch my episode on science proves that God exists. That's where we get into the heart, the science that's coming out about the heart and the mind, and the cohesion, and kind of the brain and heart waves that come together in perfect cohesion. And then what then happens in the world is a manifestation. And, a lot of religions don't like that word manifestation, but it's all over the book of Ether. It's by faith, all things are manifest. So it's like, we are children of God, learning to be like him, to be able to manifest his miracles in his will. I think there's a right and a wrong way to do that, but like anything, but it was faith that manifested him into the world the first time he came. And I think that's a symbol of his second coming. It will be by faith, that heart and mind combining, that will quite literally manifest that power of him within us, to be ready for him. So that episode talks about the heart and mind. So his work begins as heart and mind combine. His mysteries unfold the space of time. That's an episode we haven't done yet. We'll talk about time in a coming episode in relation to the Fibonacci sequence. So we'll get into sequence there. With each miracle, he reveals your soul. That goes back to Alma 32, verse 34, that it's a process of revelation, revealing, and that, your faith may become dormant in this thing because you now have a knowledge in this thing, but it's just that thing. And then you'll go do it again in another thing until you have a knowledge in that thing, until you have a knowledge in that thing, until as a whole, you have a knowledge in Christ. And eventually all this comes together to quicken you to him. And in the process, you are revealed as well. Who you are is revealed as well, because you are his. He reveals your soul. The seed of faith is finally understood, implanted by his word. That was the whole last episode I did, the part 3. On the spirit of revelation. He reveals your soul. Let's see. And then it goes back into the chorus. You're made to need a miracle to prove you walk with God, to learn his mind and feel his heart and know him when he calls. And then it kind of extends. And if you need a miracle, then he will comfort you. And that has relations to the second veil, the second comforter. And John 14, verses 16 and 18. I will not leave you comfortless. I will come to you. So that's the brother of Jared moment, the miracle of all miracles, the comforter. And then, and that's really it. And then there's a bridge and then the chorus again. So that's kind of the gist of it. So I hope you like it. I hope that it implants ideas of your ability to come to know God in your mind as you listen to it, and that you will see your own processes of faith in things where you are becoming and you're going through this creationary pattern in any area of your life, and in any area you want to go or feel compelled to go or have a desire that you think God put there. I had no idea I was going to end up writing music, but I gave up everything else I was working on, and then it ended up here, and it was all just based off of feeling. So, and it's been a fun journey, not because much has come from it, but, lots come from it for me personally in understanding. And, I think that's just something I want everybody to be able to experience and go from there. Let me see if I can stop sharing this. The other thing I'm going to try to do is put the song on that website, Patterns and Sequences, so you can download it for free. I have not actually done that yet. I don't know if anybody's tried. If it's possible, I have some other songs on there and some that my friend did. You'll have to let me know, because I'm not very good with technology, but I'm going to try to put it on there so that you can download it. It'll be available there for free. It'll also be on YouTube for free. If you do want it on iTunes, or it'll be on any of those sites, but you will have to pay for it on those. That's just the way that goes. I only know how to download things on iTunes. I don't know how to take something from download MP3 onto my phone. I'm sure there's a way to do it. I just don't. So just full disclosure, I want to make this free. I don't want to be teaching things about the temple and then trying to sell you on something. So I will make it available for free for you guys. And if that doesn't work, you can even message me and I could send it to you. I think through MP3 through the phone, I can do that. But if you do want it on your iTunes or Spotify or whatever the million other sites are, you will have to purchase. But just FYI, I think they send me like a penny for every song that's downloaded. And so the amount of money I spend to make the song and the amount that I would get would never equate. So it's not like, just full disclosure right there. I'm not trying to sell you on anything. I just want to make it available for people. So just so you're aware, I will get that up. And then if it can't be downloaded on, it's patternsandsequences.com. If you can't get it from there, just message me and I'll just send it to you. Anyway, so that is all. I just want to finish with that and say thank you for watching. And I hope you enjoy this. And next time, I don't fully know. I'll just wait and see what feels right. But we're a couple things that are coming up. We're gonna talk about time. That might be the next thing to do because it's got to tie back into this process of the spirit of revelation again, the Fibonacci sequence, time and order. And then we're going to talk about rainbows and the token of the covenant. And so we'll talk about some symbolisms there in some of the future episodes. So just for what's coming ahead. And again, thank you for watching.
As chaos in the world overflows, when trials are too much to undergo, it seems impossible. Hold steady in His hope, doubting would you ever come to know, to embrace impossible. You were made to need a miracle, to prove you walk with God, to learn His mind and fill His heart, and know Him when He calls. It's possible. His work begins when heart and mind combine. His mysteries unfold the space of time. With each miracle, He reveals your soul. The seed of faith is finally understood and planted by His word. You were made to need a miracle, to prove you walk with God, to learn His mind and feel His heart, and know Him when He calls. And if you need a miracle, then He will comfort you in the wake of a miracle. The impossible He'll do. You were made to need a miracle. You were made to need a miracle. Made to need a miracle, to prove you walk with God, to learn His mind and feel His heart, and know Him when He calls. And if you need a miracle, then He will comfort you in the wake of a miracle. The impossible He'll do. Impossible.